His lawyer leaned closer and whispered just 5 words. Only 5. And Vincent's face, that arrogant, self-satisfied face I had looked at across the breakfast table for 15 years, drained of all color. His hands began to shake. The papers he had been so eager to sign trembled like leaves in a storm. And for the first time in 3 years, I smiled. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start from the beginning, because you need to understand how we ended up here. How a woman everyone thought had lost her mind was actually playing the longest, most patient game of her life. My name is Alexis Dunst. I'm 34 years old, and until 3 months ago, I was married to Vincent Mercer. 15 years of marriage. Longer than most Hollywood relationships, longer than some small countries have existed, and definitely longer than my patience should have lasted. But I'm a stubborn woman. I inherited that from my grandmother. I met Vincent when I was 17. I had graduated high school early, not because I was a genius, but because I was practical, motivated, and desperate to get out of my parents' house. I got a job at Henderson and Price law firm as a file clerk. Minimum wage, maximum paper cuts, but it was mine. By 18, I'd worked my way up to legal assistant. Tyler came along when I was 20. I kept working at the law firm part-time while raising our son, building up my 401k, saving every spare dollar. My grandmother always said a woman should have her own money. Not secret money, she'd clarify, just her own. Something nobody could take away. At 23, Vincent's business finally took off. He asked me to quit the law firm and work with him full-time. He needed someone to manage the books, deal with clients, coordinate contractors, someone he could trust completely. So I became his unpaid everything. Bookkeeper, office manager, client liaison, interior decorator for model homes, marketing coordinator, event planner. I did it all while raising Tyler, running our household, and somehow keeping everyone fed and reasonably happy. My official title was wife. My unofficial title was everything else. For 11 years, I poured myself into building Vincent's dream. And for 11 years, he took the credit, the awards, the recognition. At every industry event, I was just Vincent's wife. At every celebration, he thanked his team, his mentors, his vision, but somehow never quite got around to thanking me. Somewhere along the way, things changed. He started making decisions without asking me. Started staying late at work more and more. Started criticizing, and I want the house, the cars, the business, everything. You can keep Tyler. He said it like he was ordering from a menu. I'll take the assets. Hold the child. Thanks. Keep Tyler, like our 15-year-old son was leftover pizza. Like he was an inconvenience he was generously allowing me to take. I just stared at him. 15 years of marriage, and this was how it ended, at our kitchen table, between the salt shaker and the butter dish, like I was just another item he was discarding. What I didn't know in that moment, what I wouldn't find out until later, was that Vincent had been planning this for months. He already had a lawyer, Harold Whitfield. Expensive. Experienced. He'd been building his exit strategy while I was meal prepping and scheduling his dentist appointments. I'd been blindsided by the man I had trusted with everything. The next day, his mother showed up. Lorraine Mercer, a woman who had treated me like the help for 15 years, arrived with her perfectly styled hair and her perfectly practiced sympathy. She patted my hand and told me I should have tried harder to keep him happy. Men have needs, dear," she said, like she was explaining something complicated to a slow child. Patiently preparing ever since. Before we go any further, if you're enjoying this story, please hit that subscribe button and tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is there. I read every single comment. Thank you. Now back to the disaster. Within a week of the announcement, Vincent had completely taken control. The guest room became my permanent space in what used to be our home. My closet shrank from a walk-in to 2 small sections he generously allowed me to keep. The message was clear: this wasn't my house anymore. Within 2 weeks, he started bringing her around. Brittany Sawyer, 27 years old. She worked at his company. Of course she did. She had that Instagram perfect look, blonde highlights, flawless nails, yoga pants that cost more than my weekly grocery bill. She walked into my kitchen like she owned it, wearing my apron, my grandmother's apron, while making smoothies in my blender. She was younger than my marriage, younger than my favorite handbag, but she made great smoothies, so I guess that counted for something. Vincent showed her off like a trophy. They sat on my couch, watched my television, ate off my plates. He wrapped his arm around her right in front of me, like I was furniture, like I had already vanished. The humiliation grew worse every day. First, he canceled my personal credit card. "We need to separate finances," he said, like he was being reasonable. Then he canceled the joint card. She paused on that one, like she was considering keeping it herself. What I wasn't allowed to take was any jewelry Vincent had bought me over 15 years, any furniture I had chosen, anything of value. Those were marital assets, Lorraine explained, and Vincent was entitled to them. She packed my things in garbage bags. Not boxes. Garbage bags. Like I was trash being taken out. Through all of this, I thought I had one person I could trust. Diane Holloway. We'd been friends since high school, 20 years of friendship through boyfriends and breakups and babies and everything in between. She was the first person I called after Vincent dropped the news. She was supportive, always checking in, always asking how I was holding up, always ready to listen. She came over with wine and let me cry on her shoulder. She told me I deserved better. She told me Vincent was making a huge mistake. But something felt off. Small things. Vincent started knowing my plans before I'd even made them. When I mentioned to Diane that I was thinking about fighting for the house, Tyler came home the next day saying his dad told him it wouldn't work. When I told Diane I was looking at apartments in a specific neighborhood, Vincent casually commented that the area was too expensive for me. Then it clicked. Looking back, I should have seen it years earlier. The way Diane always lit up when Vincent walked into a room. The empty promises. At least charge more, Diane. But the worst part wasn't Vincent. It wasn't Lorraine. It wasn't even Diane. The worst part was Tyler. My son saw everything, the girlfriend, the grandmother stuffing my life into bags, the way his father looked at me like I was nothing. And Vincent was working on him, poisoning him a little more every day. Your mom is making this difficult. I just want everyone to be happy. She's the one dragging this out. I'm trying to be fair, but she won't cooperate. Tyler started pulling away from me. Not angry, just distant. Confused. He didn't know who to believe, and his father was very, very convincing. I could lose the house. I could lose the money. I could lose everything I'd spent 15 years building. But watching my son look at me like I was the problem, that was the knife. That was the wound that actually bled. I hired a lawyer. Nina Castellano, recommended by my old firm. 52 years old. Sharp as a razor. Absolutely no patience for nonsense. She reviewed my situation and laid out the battle plan. You helped build this business, she said. You're entitled to half of everything. The house, the company, the accounts. We fight. I stared at her for a long moment. What if I don't want to fight? Nina looked at me like I'd started speaking another language, like I'd suggested sending Vincent a thank you card and a fruit basket. She thought everyone had advice. Everyone thought they knew what I should do. Everyone saw a woman who had given up, who couldn't fight, who was letting her husband walk all over her. Everyone was wrong. Here's the thing about being underestimated, people stop watching you. They stop being careful around you. They stop guarding their secrets. And that's exactly when you learn everything you need to know. 3 years. That's how long I'd been carrying this secret. That's how long I'd known the truth about Vincent Mercer and his glittering, glamorous, completely fake empire. It started on a random Tuesday night 3 years before the divorce. Vincent was working late again. He was always working late by then, though I didn't yet understand what that really meant. I was going through the company books, reconciling accounts, doing the unglamorous work that kept his business running. And I found something strange. A transfer to an account I didn't recognize. Then another. Then a pattern. Money flowing out of our accounts into places I'd never seen before. I dug deeper. I stayed up until 3 in the morning, following the trail. What I found made my blood run cold. Vincent had been taking loans against everything we owned. The house, our beautiful house everyone admired, had 3 mortgages on it. The original loan was $400,000. A second mortgage of $350,000. The business was even worse. Lines of credit maxed out at $200,000. Back taxes owed of $85,000. Vendor debts of $120,000. Equipment loans of $75,000. The company Vincent bragged about at every party, the company that was supposedly thriving, was drowning in nearly $500,000 of debt. Even the cars weren't real. All 3 were leased, with balloon payments coming due. We didn't own anything. We just had very expensive monthly obligations. I sat in my kitchen at 3 in the morning, surrounded by printouts, and did the math. Total debt was approximately $1.9 million. Total actual asset value, maybe $1.6 million. We were $300,000 in the hole, maybe more. But where had all the money gone? I kept digging. Over the following weeks, I traced every transaction I could find, and the picture that emerged was devastating. Cryptocurrency investments, $180,000, completely lost. Gambling, $75,000, gone. An apartment I didn't know about, rented for a woman I didn't know about. $60,000 in rent and furnishings. Lifestyle expenses that never made it home. Watches, suits, trips I was never invited on. Another $85,000. My husband wasn't building an empire. He was building a house of cards with borrowed cards. A woman should have her own money. I had my IRA from my law firm days. I'd rolled it over when I quit but never touched it, and by then it had grown to about $180,000. That money was mine, earned from my job, separate property under the law. And then there was Grandma herself. She passed away when I was 28 and left me $340,000. Her will was very specific. This money is for Alexis alone. I kept it in a separate account for 6 years, never mixing it with Vincent's finances, never using it for household expenses. My grandmother kept her own account for 50 years. Not secret money, she always said, just mine. Smartest woman I ever knew. Altogether, I had about $520,000 that was completely, legally, separately mine. So I didn't confront Vincent. Instead, I protected myself. I worked with my uncle, a retired accountant, to create an irrevocable trust for Tyler. My IRA and my inheritance went into that trust. My name wasn't on it as a beneficiary. Vincent's name certainly wasn't on it. It was for Tyler's future, college, a first home, emergencies, and it was untouchable. Then I documented everything. Every mortgage document. Every hidden account. Every suspicious transaction. I printed copies and kept them at my sister's house. I put copies in a safe deposit box. I saved everything on an encrypted drive. And then I waited. I knew Vincent would leave eventually. Everything, I almost laughed out loud. He wasn't asking for assets. He was demanding debt. He just didn't know it yet. Back in the present, I sat across from Nina Castellano and placed 3 binders on her desk. 3 years of evidence. Every mortgage document. Every loan statement. Every hidden account. She read in silence for almost an hour. When she finally looked up, her expression had completely changed. "You've known about this for 3 years?" she asked. I nodded. I was waiting for him to leave. I knew he would eventually. And when he demanded everything, he demanded all the debt. He just doesn't understand that yet. Nina leaned back in her chair. The pity was gone from her eyes. The concern was gone. What replaced it was something like awe. "So when you sign over the assets, you walk away clean," she said. "He gets the mortgages, the business debts, the lease obligations. All of it becomes his sole responsibility. And your inheritance and your retirement account, separate property, never commingled, are legally protected, sitting safely in a trust for your son." Nina was quiet for a long moment. Then she smiled. A slow, dangerous smile. "Mrs. Dunst," she said, "I believe I owe you an apology. I thought you'd given up." I smiled back. "Everyone thinks that. That's kind of the point." Nina went from looking at me like a lost kitten to looking at me like a chess grandmaster. I asked for so little that even the mediator seemed uncomfortable. "I just want enough to start over," I said during our second mediation. "I'm not trying to be difficult. I know the business is his life's work. I know the house means everything to him. I don't want to tear our family apart more than it already is." I requested a settlement of $50,000 cash, my personal belongings, and shared custody of Tyler. That was it. Vincent agreed immediately. He was probably expecting me to fight for half of everything, because that's what any reasonable lawyer would demand. Instead, I was asking for crumbs. He looked at me across the mediation table with something almost like pity, like I was a wounded animal he was graciously putting out of its misery. I deserved an Oscar for that performance, or at least a Golden Globe. I'd been given the role of a lifetime, and my only audience was my lying, cheating, soon-to-be bankrupt ex-husband. With each passing week, Vincent's arrogance grew. He stopped being careful. Stopped pretending to be reasonable. He started telling everyone who would listen that I hadn't even fought. She just gave up, he told his golf buddies. I offered her a fair settlement and she took it without a word. Lorraine was even worse. She bragged at her book club, at her church group, at every social gathering she attended. Vincent is keeping everything. That woman didn't get a dime. I always knew she wasn't strong enough for my son. He wore it to our next mediation session, making sure I noticed. He also took Brittany to dinner at La Maison, the French restaurant where we'd celebrated our 10th anniversary. He posted photos on social media. Life is good when you're with the right person, he wrote. The right person. The person who didn't know about his debt yet. Meanwhile, Brittany had started redecorating my house, new furniture in the living room, new art on the walls. She even painted my kitchen gray. She painted it gray. I spent 3 weeks choosing that sage green. 3 weeks of paint samples, lighting tests, driving myself crazy trying to find the perfect shade. And she covered it with builder-grade gray like it was nothing. Gray like her personality, like her future with Vincent once she realized he was broke. Very fitting, actually. Diane kept calling, fishing for information under the disguise of friendship. I played my part perfectly. How are you holding up? She'd ask, her voice soaked in fake concern. I just want it to be over, I'd say, letting my voice crack a little. I can't fight anymore. I don't have the energy. Within hours, Vincent would know. I could almost feel him relaxing, dropping his guard even more. Diane thought she was playing me. In reality, she was just a delivery service. Not a very expensive one, either. But while the adults were playing their games, Tyler was watching. And my son, my smart, observant, wonderful son, he looked at me with those serious eyes, so much like his father's, but with something Vincent had lost a long time ago. Honesty. Mom, he said quietly, is Dad actually rich? I looked at him for a long moment. What do you think? He thought about it. I think something's not right. I think he's pretending. I reached across the table and squeezed his hand. Trust me. Just wait a little longer. My 15-year-old figured it out before 2 lawyers and a certified accountant did. I should charge his college fund consulting fees. Behind the scenes, Nina was preparing our legal strategy with surgical precision. The main divorce agreement clearly stated that I was giving up all claims to marital property. The house, the business, the vehicles, everything would go to Vincent. In exchange, I would take my modest cash settlement and walk away. But attached to that agreement was an addendum. A detailed liability disclosure. Every debt, every mortgage, every loan, every obligation tied to those assets. When Vincent signed for the assets, he would legally assume all liabilities. The mortgages would become his responsibility alone. The business debts would fully transfer to him. The car leases would be his problem. It was all there in black and white. Legal. Proper. Devastating. Legal documents are like poetry, Nina told me. Boring, expensive poetry that can ruin someone's life. Harold pushed back. I strongly recommend we verify the asset values before you sign. This is a significant risk. Vincent cut him off. Brittany wants this done. I want this done. No more delays. Harold had practiced law for over 30 years. He knew when a client was about to make a terrible mistake. He also knew he couldn't force a grown man to listen. He presented Vincent with a waiver acknowledging that independent financial review had been recommended and declined against counsel's advice. Vincent signed it without reading it. Just like he signed everything without reading it. Never underestimate the power of an impatient girlfriend to make a man skip the fine print. Brittany was worth millions to me in legal strategy. The night before the hearing, Vincent sent me a text. "Thank you for not making this ugly." I stared at it for a long time. 15 years of marriage. 15 years of building his business, raising his son, managing his life. And he was thanking me for being easy while he threw me away. I typed back, "I just want what's best for Tyler." What was best for Tyler was already secured. His trust fund. His future. And a father about to learn the most expensive lesson of his life. Nina called me that evening. Thursday, 9 a.m. final hearing. Judge Patricia Holden. "Are you ready?" I looked around my small apartment, the second-hand furniture, the boxes. You already know something satisfying is coming. Hit that like button if you're ready for Vincent to get exactly what he deserves. And if you haven't subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? I've got more stories where this came from. Now let's finish this. Thursday, April 17th, 9 a.m., courtroom 4B. I remember every detail of that morning. The sunlight pouring through the tall windows. The smell of old wood and floor polish. The quiet murmur of lawyers shuffling papers. This was where 15 years of marriage would officially end. And where 3 years of patience would finally pay off. Vincent arrived first. Of course he did. He was wearing his best suit, the charcoal Armani I'd helped him choose for a client dinner 3 years earlier. His new watch caught the light as he shook Harold's hand. He looked confident. Relaxed. Like a man about to close a very favorable deal. Brittany waited in the hallway. She wasn't allowed inside the courtroom, but she wanted to be nearby for moral support. I caught a glimpse of her through the door, perfect makeup, designer bag, scrolling her phone like this was just another boring errand. Lorraine was there too, seated in the gallery. She'd dressed up, probably planning a celebratory lunch afterward. When she saw me, she smiled. The kind of smile you give someone you believe you've already beaten. I arrived a few minutes after Vincent. Simple navy dress. She had seen every trick, every manipulation, every lie divorcing couples could throw at each other. By now, nothing surprised her. She skimmed the case file, then looked up. Mercer versus Mercer. Final dissolution hearing. I understand the parties have reached an agreement. Harold stood first. Yes, Your Honor. My client, Vincent Mercer, will assume all marital assets, including the family home, the real estate development business, and all associated vehicles. In exchange, Mrs. Dunst will receive a cash settlement of $50,000. Nina stood beside me. That's correct, Your Honor. My client agrees to give up all claims to these assets and accepts the proposed settlement. Judge Holden's eyes moved to me. She studied my face carefully, clearly searching for signs that I was being pressured into a bad deal. Mrs. Dunst, she said, I need to confirm that you understand what you're agreeing to today. You are giving up claims to significant property, the family home, and the business you helped build. Are you certain this is what you want? I kept my voice soft, slightly shaky. Yes, Your Honor. I understand. And you're entering this agreement voluntarily? No one is pressuring you? No, Your Honor. I looked down at my hands, then back at her. I just want my husband to have everything he asked for. I want this to be over. The judge studied me for another look. I signed slowly and carefully, every stroke of my pen deliberate. This was the moment I had waited 3 years for, and I intended to savor it. Across the courtroom, I saw Vincent glance at Lorraine and smile. She nodded back, pleased. In the hallway, his phone buzzed, probably Brittany cheering him on. He even checked it during his own divorce hearing. That was the kind of man he was. Meanwhile, Harold Whitfield did what good lawyers do, reviewing the documents one final time. Main agreement signed. Asset schedule signed. Settlement terms signed. Then he reached the addendum. The liability disclosure statement. I watched his face as he read it, saw confusion flash across his features. He flipped back a page, then forward again, as if hoping he'd misread something. He hadn't. His face drained of color. He leaned toward Vincent, trying to keep his voice low. Sir, we need to talk. Vincent waved him off, still enjoying his victory. Not now. We're almost done. Harold's voice grew urgent. You're assuming all debt. Vincent turned to him sharply. What? The liability disclosure, Harold whispered, she hid this from me. This is fraud. Mr. Mercer, sit down, Judge Holden said sharply. These numbers are fake, Vincent insisted, his voice rising. She manipulated the documents. Mr. Mercer, the judge said firmly, sit down. He did, but his hands were shaking. The confident smile was gone, replaced by pure panic. Judge Holden reviewed the papers, then looked at him. Mr. Mercer, I'm looking at the liability disclosure attached to this agreement. These debts are tied to assets you are claiming, assets in your name, your business, your property. She stared at him hard. Are you telling this court you don't know your own financial situation? Silence. Watching Vincent try to explain his ignorance was like watching a cat explain a broken vase, strangely fascinating and completely unbelievable. Harold cleared his throat. Your Honor, I advised my client to conduct an independent financial review before this hearing. He declined. I have documentation. He produced the waiver Vincent had signed without reading, clearly stating that a full audit was recommended and refused. Judge Holden scanned it. So Mr. Mercer was advised to verify these figures and chose not to. He signed a waiver acknowledging that decision. She looked back at Vincent. Is that correct? Vincent stared at the paper like it had just bitten him. I didn't. I thought. Is that your signature, Mr. Mercer? A long pause. Yes. Then you assumed this risk voluntarily, Judge Holden said calmly. You had the opportunity to investigate. You chose not to. The agreement stands. Vincent turned to me, desperation breaking through. You knew, he said, his voice cracking. You knew all of this. I met his eyes evenly. I was your bookkeeper for 11 years, Vincent. I knew everything. His face shifted through confusion, anger, betrayal, fear, and finally the one I had been waiting for. Realization. The understanding that he had done this to himself. I want to withdraw the agreement, he said, turning back to the judge. I didn't understand what I was signing. This isn't fair. Judge Holden shook her head. Mr. Mercer, you signed documents before this court stating you understood and agreed to all terms. You were represented by competent counsel. You declined additional review. Your wife did not hide anything. These are your debts, your mortgages, your obligations. She paused. The agreement is final. The gavel came down. Mrs. Dunst, you have your settlement. Mr. Mercer, you have the assets as agreed, along with all associated liabilities. This marriage is dissolved. I stood, smoothed my dress, and picked up my purse. Then I looked at Vincent one last time. He was slumped in his chair, papers scattered in front of him, his entire world collapsing around him. You said you wanted everything except Tyler, I said quietly. I gave you exactly what you asked for. I walked out of the courtroom without looking back. In the hallway, I could hear Vincent's voice rising, yelling at Harold, demanding to know how this happened, threatening lawsuits. Harold's calm replies carried through the noise. I told you to get an audit. I have it in writing. You refused. Through the glass doors, I saw Brittany's face change as she listened. I saw her look at Vincent, really look at him, and realize he wasn't the successful businessman she thought she was getting. She was gone before I reached the elevator, moving fast, heels clicking against the marble, never looking back. Brittany left my marriage faster than she entered it. At least she was consistent. I stepped outside into the April sunshine. The sky was blue. The air was warm. Somewhere behind me, my ex-husband was screaming about fairness and fraud and how none of this was his fault. The collapse came faster than I expected. Within 2 weeks, Brittany had moved out, packing her things in the middle of the night and leaving behind a note that said, "This isn't what I signed up for." The gray kitchen sat empty. Within a month, Vincent tried to sell the house, but when you owe more than something is worth, there are no buyers, only banks calling about missed payments and realtors suggesting short sales. Within 2 months, the business began to default. Vendors filed lawsuits. The line of credit was frozen. The company Vincent had spent 15 years building, the company I had supported for 11, was crumbling into dust. Within 3 months, Vincent was meeting with bankruptcy attorneys. The man who once bragged about his empire was now calculating which assets he could protect from creditors. The answer was almost none. Lorraine's perfect son started calling family members for loans, showing up at relatives' homes with excuses and explanations. Nobody knew about the debt. Alexis must have hidden it. I was tricked. But the documents told a different story. The mortgages were in his name. The loans were in his name. The gambling debts, the crypto losses, the secret apartment, all of it was his doing, his signatures, his choices. I heard Lorraine's Christmas newsletter that year was very short. Vincent is exploring new opportunities. Yes, opportunities in debt restructuring. The side conflicts resolved themselves with a kind of poetic balance. Diane called about a week after the hearing, her voice shaking. I had no idea things were this bad. I'm so sorry, Alexis. I never meant for. I thought Vincent and I didn't answer. I didn't respond. I didn't give her the closure she wanted. Some bridges aren't meant to be rebuilt. I imagine she's still waiting for Vincent to notice her. She'll be waiting a long time. Lorraine tried a different tactic, going through Tyler. Tell your mother I didn't know about the money problems. Tell her I'm sorry for how I treated her. Tell her I want to talk. Tyler looked at his grandmother, the woman who had packed his mother's belongings into garbage bags, who had called her worthless, who had sided with his father without hesitation, and said, "Mom's busy building her life. She doesn't have time for excuses." Lorraine wanted forgiveness. I wanted peace. Guess which one of us got what we wanted? Tyler, my smart, observant, wonderful son, finally understood everything. Not because I explained it, but because he figured it out himself. He read the court documents. He heard his father's excuses. He watched Brittany leave. He watched Lorraine scramble. He watched the entire facade fall apart. One evening, about a month after the divorce, he sat with me in my small apartment, the one with the sage green kitchen, the second-hand furniture, the boxes finally unpacked. "You waited 3 years," he said quietly. "You knew this the whole time and you just waited." "I wanted to make sure you were protected," I told him. "Whatever happened between your father and me, I needed to know you'd be okay." The trust fund. $520,000, safe and untouchable. He was quiet for a moment, then he hugged me. Really hugged me. The kind of hug I hadn't gotten from my 15-year-old son in months. The kind that said he understood. The kind that said he was proud of me. 15-year-old boys don't usually hug their mothers like that. I knew I'd done something right. My $50,000 settlement went toward starting over. The trust fund stayed exactly where it was. Tyler's future, college, maybe a first home one day, a safety net no one could ever touch. And me, I enrolled in interior design courses at the community college. The dream I had put on hold at 23 to help Vincent build his empire. Now I was finally building my own. I started small. My first real client was a woman named Sandra, 52 years old, just coming out of a 28-year marriage. She stood in her empty new apartment, looking lost, and asked me, "How do you start over?" I thought for a moment, then said, "One room at a time, one color at a time, one day at a time." We painted her kitchen sage green. She cried when she saw it. "Happy tears," she said. The color of new beginnings. About 3 months after the divorce was finalized, Vincent showed up at my apartment. I barely recognized him. He had lost weight, not the healthy kind. Dark circles hung under his eyes. His suit was wrinkled. His watch was gone. He looked like a man who had gone to war and lost. He stood in my doorway, and for a moment, I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. "I didn't know it was this bad," he said. His voice was hollow. "I made mistakes. I know that now. I didn't mean for any of this to happen." I leaned against the doorframe and really looked at him. The man I had loved for nearly half my life. The man who had thrown me away like trash.